Chutes and Ladders. Celebrities you may have not known are wrestling fans. Hey everyone, my name is Jason.
I'm Desiree Josen.
Hey, today's going to be a really fun episode. We're actually going to deep dive into celebrities you may have not known are actual wrestling fans. This is actually a pretty extensive list. This is obviously sources we've received from throughout the internet and either heard them either verbally vocalize the fact that they like wrestling. Yeah, the first one we'll get into. I think this is pretty obvious because he actually used to work for the WWE. Freddie Prinze Jr. I know you're a big fan. What do you got to say about him?
I love Freddie. And it's not just because of my 90s rom-coms. I think it is though. But when I found out that he loved wrestling, I'm like, I love you even more. But no, he's featured on a lot of the A&E documentaries for wrestling. You can see all of that on Peacock. It's just really cool to see someone who has their own career but loves and like really nerds out to wrestling, and he knows his stuff, and he has his own podcast for wrestling. He worked in he was a writer for Creative for 4 years back in 08 to 12, and he's awesome. Yeah. I want to be his friend.
Absolutely. And what's really cool about this, we did a show on a biography on the both of us, and I remember you said that you were born into wrestling. I think it was the same thing actually applies for him. I think his grandmother actually got him into wrestling, and it just kind of stuck.
Mm-hmm. No, it's pretty awesome.
For sure. All right, the next one. This made me glow when I watched the documentary Shangri-La, which you can find on Showtime, and is Rick Rubin, who's obviously arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, music producers of all time. I have to kind of bring this up because I watched this documentary over and over and over. It's one of my favorite documentaries ever. He actually, when he used to cut promos for the Beastie Boys, he actually got his aggressive nature and the format all from professional wrestling. Did you know that Rick Rubin was actually a wrestling fan?
No. No. Not at all.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. And I recommend this documentary to anyone, whether you're, just a music fan, because he's obviously done, he does music for everybody. I mean, everybody, all genres. I mean, you're talking about from Jay-Z to Weezer to Red Hot Chili Peppers. The documentary kind of shows that. But the one thing he said, this is the beginning of episode 3. Yeah, I actually have this memorized. He actually says, it seems like wrestling is more rooted in reality than we realize. He said, I used to think that the world was real and wrestling is fake. Now I realize it's all fake, but wrestling was in on it first.
I love that.
I'm telling you, I jumped up for joy when I saw that. Obviously, Triple H and Stephanie are also in that documentary as well. Listen, this is not a plug necessarily for that documentary, but it's one of my personal favorites of all time. I love music. I love wrestling. And the fact that he was so heavily influenced as far as his career goes from wrestling, it just blows my mind. And I had to bring this one in.
And the fact that Triple H and Stephanie were on that documentary makes it even more legit too.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. 1,000,000%. All right, cool. Next one. I didn't know this until a little later on, but she is really into it. Apparently she got into it with KO on Instagram or social media, but Melissa Joan Hart, Clarissa Explains It All, Teenage Witch. I love her. Obviously I'm a big TGIF guy because of Boy Meets World, but yeah, give us a little insight on this.
I love Melissa Joan Hart. I grew up watching Clarissa Darling on Nickelodeon, and she had the coolest clothes. And speaking of TGIF, on Sabrina the Teenage Witch on Friday nights on ABC, you can actually see her at a lot of main events. She goes to a whole bunch of manias, so she's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And just throwing this out there as well. Funny enough, I remember, back in the day with Clarissa Explains It All, Nickelodeon, I remember they asked what her favorite music was, and she said grunge. Now that I know that she loves wrestling, yeah, I'm her cool points are just skyrocketing.
Yeah, these people are so cool.
Right? All right. Speaking of TGIF, the reason why I watch TGIF until this day, one of my favorite shows of all time Boy Meets World. When I found out Danielle Fishel was or is a wrestling fan, and because I listen to Pod Meets World religiously every single week, and I hope she gets to listen to our podcast. That would be amazing. That made my day. But Danielle Fishel, wow, Topanga, I was just over. I was over the moon when I found this out.
I love her. Who doesn't love Topanga?
Exactly.
I know, and we grew up with her, and then now it's just like those were our friends when we were little, and then we find out they like something else that we love. We're like, oh my God, we're friends.
And listen, if she's listening out there or anyone on Pod Meets World, Jetson knows I know their producer. Please listen to our show. If you ever need someone to come on the podcast for 2 minutes, I'd love to come on. Or please come into ours.
I think Jason is also proposing to Topanga as well.
Snap. Yeah. I would, but I know she's actually married to the producer of that podcast, so I have to keep off. I know. Fine. All right, next one. Big time University of Texas Longhorn supporter. Been in many movies. I think he's hilarious. I think he's great. I don't want to list all the movies because there's too many, but Matthew McConaughey, I actually didn't know this until recently.
All right. I love Matthew McConaughey just because of how he loves his football. But yeah, he used to go to like house shows. He was at a house show and he got so into it and he spit on King Kong Bundy. and then he got kicked out of the show. And I'm like, but how cool is that? But yeah. I mean, I get it. It's a Southern thing. So you love football and wrestling. So it makes sense.
I was going to say, listen, being in Texas, if I had to guess, he's probably in love with the Von Erichs. I'm sure they had a huge impact on his decision to like wrestling. So, yeah. All right, cool. Next one of my favorite actors of all time. When I found this out, I was just over the moon as well. Sacha Baron Cohen, Ali G, Bruno, Borat. I watched every single one of the movies, the shows till this day. I still watch because there's some of the funniest segments ever. In the end of Bruno, when he was in the cage match, the way he kind of obviously ran a promo and stuff like that, you had to imagine that a lot of that was influenced by his love for wrestling.
I can totally see it. I love him, and I just loved him as Borat. That's all I can think about. But
absolutely. All right, cool. Next one. This one, obviously, he's been on Comedy Central, had his own show. He's been a bunch of different things, but Jon Stewart. I think I've seen him at a couple Manias and stuff in the past, and I think this is really cool.
Yeah, he's not someone that I would pin as a fan, but then I do remember that he was, I think he was on like a Raw episode, doing something with Cena. And yeah, it's just like, these are like the most random guys who I would never think, but I'm like, okay, you just went up in my ranks because we're friends.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think this also goes to show that the creative power behind it, because when it comes to storylines and stuff, wrestling's evergreen. They consistently have to produce storylines, and a lot of this is conflict driven. But remember, a lot of these guys that are in Hollywood, they have to write storylines that are conflict driven. So, maybe this is an influence on them, or vice versa. I know we know that wrestling takes a lot of storylines that they've seen in Hollywood, but then again, you can kind of argue the same way the other way. So
it's not just wrestling. It's not the physical part of it. It's acting, it's performing. There is technology and editing behind it. Our community is just so crazy diverse, and I love it.
1,000,000%. Absolutely. All right. The next one, how do you not love him? I mean, way too many just bangers after bangers from a comedic standpoint. I actually didn't know this until a couple of days ago, until we started doing research on this. But Adam Sandler.
I love Adam Sandler, and I know he's been at a couple of Manias, like front row, just having like the best time. And he's had a couple of wrestlers cameo in his movies. Like I think he's had Goldberg,
and the Big Show in Waterboy, and
a couple of.
Yeah, the Big Show.
Yeah, and then he had a couple of other ones. So,
well, that makes total sense. Hey, this is one big community.
He's well-read. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. The next one, I gotta be honest, I don't know much about him, so I'd love to hear what you have to say. But I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Joe Magnaniolo. Is that how you pronounce it?
No, it's Joe Manganiello.
Okay, whoops. I don't know anything about him, sadly.
He looks like he could be a wrestler. He's a big guy, very muscular, very handsome and charismatic. I know him he played the werewolf Alcide Herveau in True Blood.
Okay.
But he's also like a really big nerd. So he's like a collector. He plays Dungeons and Dragons and he likes wrestling, but he hangs out with like Hogan and Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was on a couple of Raw episodes. He cut
Oh,
a
cool.
couple of like quick promos with them. But what I think is so funny is he's actually good friends with the Big Show, Paul White, and they actually play Dungeons and Dragons together. And I just can't imagine like two really big guys that are super intimidating just sitting around a board like rolling dice.
That wraps up this episode. Please chime in. What did you think? Where do your opinions differ from the both of us? Please DM us at The Chutes and Ladders. Please like, share, and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify. Until next time, my name is Jason.
I'm Desiree Josen.
Have an awesome day.
Bye, friends.